Welcome, brave souls, to the chilling depths of horror in detail. Today we're going to share Wendigo horror stories. First story. I nearly escaped a Wendigo at the cost of both of my parents. I kept this story a secret my whole life. I'm 22 now. This happened more than a decade ago, and I still have clear and vivid memories of this day. I miss my parents so much and wish I never did what I did that afternoon. I had a nice family. I had a mom, a dad, and a sister, but yet my parents are the ones I miss most. We all lived in a nice, cozy cabin in Alaska, United States, near a dense and long-stretch forest. Usually my parents would take walks just to admire the beautiful snow and cold weather. My dad was a lumberjack and my mom was a normal housewife. We had such a perfect life before the incident happened. One morning, I woke up to my sister yelling at my parents because she hated living here. I gave her the benefit of the doubt because she was 19 years old and had her own car, but no friends due to us being isolated for miles. This argument went on for 20 minutes before I heard a door shut very loudly. I rushed downstairs to see what happened, and my mom was crying because my sister had left our family to move more in the city in a different state. My dad still had to hear this news due to him still cutting trees into smaller pieces out back. I rushed outside and I saw my sister. She wasn't actually going to the car, but instead going into the forest. I knew it. My kind sister would never leave us. I decided to follow her and see what she was up to. I quickly put on my jacket, boots, gloves, and snow pants and went into the forest. As soon as I went outside, I realized only one car was in front of our house. It seemed weird, but I just thought Dad had to run to the store and do a few errands, so I ran towards where I last saw my sister. Once I was inside the forest, I realized it stretched longer than I thought it would, and weirdly enough, there was a path leading straight. I thought my dad cut these trees due to me being little and not really knowing much about lumberjacks. I went on, and when I turned back, I could still see the house. I knew I would be safe. I would just plead with my sister not to leave, and everything would be all right. I wish it was that easy. I walked for what seemed like forever when I heard a familiar voice. My sister, I thought, and started running towards that voice, but came to a stop. In front of me were long, white, and clean bones shaped like an old Native American roof. There was one thing that stood out with those bones. My sister's pink and gold necklace, which had her name on it. I read it, and it was her name. Now I was getting scared. I turned around to see my house nowhere. I was lost. I shouted Mom, Dad, but nobody came. I ran in what seemed like a loop for 5 minutes when I heard footsteps. The footsteps seemed like that of a large creature. I ducked behind a log that had fallen and hid to not show myself. I peeked through holes in the log and saw it. This creature was black head to toe, had blood dripping down its half-torn face. It had large, bulging, almost human-like eyes. It was standing upright. It looked almost 7 feet. The scariest thing was I could see the creature's ribs, heart, and what looked like lungs still beating and perfectly in sync. I almost screamed at the sight of its nails. They were long and had points on them. The creature looked around, and when I blinked, it wasn't there. Where I thought maybe I'm just imaging weird things. I tried to laugh it off, but the thought stayed at the back of my head. I had enough and decided to run backwards again. This went on for another 5 minutes when I heard my mom's voice. I ran towards it, and it was near the bones I saw earlier. But the closer I got, the more it seemed stranger. Mom's voice was usually kind and soft, as well as comforting. But the voice I was hearing sounded demanding and slow. The closer I got, the more I saw my cabin, and I then started running towards it when the creature I saw earlier rose up on its legs, or what seemed like legs. It was taller when I was face to face with it, its eyes staring into my soul, and I thought I was going to die. With lightning speed, the creature ran towards me, and I blacked out. I woke up. I was alive in my bed, and my sister was here too. I thought it was just a dream, but noticed she was crying. She was crying in a demonic tone. I got scared and pushed back against my bed. My sister turned around, and I saw her eyes ripped out of her sockets as well as blood all around the house. I passed out again. This time I woke up in the forest. I felt immense pain near my arm, and realized my left arm was bitten off. I saw it. The creature. He was eating my arm. He noticed I was awake and just stared as I screamed for help. I heard a familiar voice once again. It sounded like my dad. But where was it coming from? The more blood I lost, the closer the voice got, and the more the creature started getting aggravated. I thought I was going to die, but saw both my parents. This made me flash back into reality, and I realized I was going to have to scream in order for me to be alive. I screamed at the top of my lungs. The creature stood on its legs and threw my arm away. He walked towards me and planned on killing me right then and there. I started crying with the last bit of energy I had left, and I saw them. My dad and my mom. They were here. I then noticed Dad was terrified and was backing away when he saw this creature. Mom threw rocks at it, and the creature ran into the forest. My parents picked me up. I was happy to see them. The last thing I saw before I blacked out was my mom behind my dad getting ripped to shreds by that thing. Second story. I saw a man eating someone alive on the side of the road. Now he knows where I live. I've driven the same back roads home for years, but I'm never taking them again. I can't. Not after what I saw last week. It was late, maybe 11:30 p.m. I just finished meeting with a client who wouldn't stop nitpicking their website redesign. It was easier to take the back roads than to deal with the highway at that hour. No lights, no traffic, just me, the hum of my car, and a stretch of empty asphalt. Usually it's peaceful, but that night it wasn't. About halfway down the road, I saw hazard lights flashing ahead, just past a curve. My first thought was that someone had car trouble. I slowed down out of habit, thinking I'd at least ask if they needed help. But then I saw him. There was a man crouched on the side of the road. At first, I couldn't tell what he was doing. It looked like he was rummaging through something. Maybe it was an animal that got hit, a deer or a coyote. I inched closer, and the headlights hit him fully. That's when I saw it. It wasn't an animal. It was a person. He was hunched over the body, his hands digging into its chest. Blood coated his face, dripping off his chin, and he was eating, ripping off chunks of flesh with his teeth. I slammed the brakes, and the screech must have startled him because he looked up. For a second, we just stared at each other. I'll never forget his face. The wide, empty eyes. The blood smeared across his cheeks like war paint. And then he smiled, this slow, deliberate grin that made my stomach turn. His teeth were stained red. I don't know what I was thinking, but I just froze. My brain couldn't process what I was seeing. Then he stood up, and I swear to God, he started walking toward my car. No, not walking, running. He came at me so fast, I almost didn't react in time. My foot slammed on the gas, and the car jerked forward. In the rearview mirror, I saw him sprinting after me, his grin stretching wider. His legs moved with mechanical, inhuman precision. He chased me for about 100 feet before stopping, standing motionless in the middle of the road. I didn't stop. I didn't even breathe until I made it home. I parked in my driveway and sat there for a minute, shaking. I told myself it was just some lunatic high on drugs. That's what people tell themselves, right? It's easier than thinking about the alternative. My house isn't much, just a small one-story place with a decent yard. Normally, it feels safe. But that night, every shadow looked like him. I locked the doors and windows, double-checked them twice, and sat on the couch with my back to the wall. I don't even own a gun. The best I could do was grab the baseball bat from the closet. I didn't sleep. Every little sound made me jump, creaks in the floorboards, the wind brushing against the siding. When a motion sensor light over the garage flicked on around 2 a.m., my heart practically stopped. I peered through the blinds, but there was nothing there. Just the empty yard. Maybe it was a raccoon. Maybe. By morning, I'd almost convinced myself I'd imagined it all. Maybe it wasn't as bad as I thought. Maybe the guy was just some weirdo messing with me. But then I saw the footprints. Muddy, bare footprints leading up the driveway. They stopped right at my front door. I hadn't imagined it. He had been there. Asterisk, 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 asterisk. After that night, my house didn't feel like home anymore. It felt wrong, like I wasn't alone. I told myself I was just being paranoid. I even tried to rationalize the footprints, Maybe it was some teenager pulling a prank. It didn't work. Deep down, I knew it was him. The second night, at around midnight, the motion light came on again. I didn't go to the window right away. I just sat there on the couch, gripping the bat, try to convince myself not to look. But curiosity got the better of me. I pulled the curtain back just enough to peek out. There was nothing at first, just my driveway, empty and still. Then I noticed something by the porch, a small pile of neatly stacked rocks. They hadn't been there earlier. That's when my phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. There were no words, just a picture. It was of my house, taken from the edge of my yard. In it, I could see myself through the window, peering out. My stomach dropped. I didn't sleep that night. The following morning, I called the police. The officer who came out was polite, but skeptical. I showed him the picture, the footprints, and the rocks. He jotted everything down, but didn't seem too concerned. Probably just a prank, he said. Kids messing around. I wanted to believe him, but I couldn't. I'll forward this to our tech team. He added, holding up the photo I'd given him. We'll also check the number and see who it belongs to. You'll hear from us soon. That evening, I went to a hardware store and bought security cameras, extra locks, and floodlights. By the time I finished installing everything, the sun had set. I felt a little safer, but not much. The surveillance gear gave me a sense of control, like maybe if I could see him coming, I have a chance to do something. But that night, the cameras proved useless. Around 1 a.m., I heard a faint tapping on the living room window. Though I was terrified to see what was causing it, I forced myself to check the camera feed. Static. Every channel showed static. The tapping grew louder, more insistent. Bat in hand, I crept to the window and peeked out. Nothing. Just the empty yard again. I went back to the couch and tried to calm down, but the tapping didn't stop. Instead, it moved, first to the living room window, then the kitchen and the bedroom. It circled the house like a predator stalking its prey. By morning, it stopped. When I checked outside, I found more footprints leading up to every first-floor window in my home. I called my best friend, Eric, and begged him to come over. I needed someone to talk to, someone to convince me I wasn't losing my mind. Eric showed up that afternoon, unconvinced but willing to help. Look, man, it's probably some head case trying to scare you, he said. But I'll stay a few nights if it makes you feel any better. Strength in numbers, right? That evening, we stayed up late, drinking and trying to lighten the mood. For a while it worked. I almost felt normal again. But as the hours passed, Eric's mood shifted. The alcohol and the long hours, they were enough to dull his caution. Relax, Jared, he said, laughing off my warnings. You're acting like this guy's the boogeyman or something. When his phone buzzed a moment later, he grabbed it and stood up. I'll take this outside. It's loud in here. Are you kidding me? I snapped, alarmed. He grinned and pulled a small switchblade from his pocket, flicking it open. I'll be fine. Let him try something. This'll handle it. I tried to protest, but he waved me off. Chill out, man. I'll be back in 5. I watched him step outside and close the door behind him. At first, everything seemed fine. I could hear his muffled voice as he paced the driveway. But then I heard it, a short, gut-wrenching scream. Eric, I yelled, grabbing the bat and running to the door. The driveway was empty. Eric's phone lay face down on the concrete, its screen cracked. A dark, glistening trail of blood led from where the phone had fallen to the edge of the woods. My stomach churned. For a moment, I couldn't move. Eric, I called again, my voice cracking. Silence. I stumbled back inside and locked the door behind me. My hand shook as I dialed 911. The police arrived quickly this time. Maybe it was the panic in my voice, or maybe it was the blood. They combed the area with flashlights and dogs, but after hours of searching, they found nothing. No body, no sign of Eric. Are you sure your friend didn't just wander off and hurt himself? One officer asked. No, I said firmly. The cop responded. How much did you say you boys had to drink tonight? I know how this looks, but I know Eric. He wouldn't leave his phone behind. And there's so much blood. You don't really think he did that to himself, do you? Please, you've got to help him. We'll keep searching, another officer promised. Let us know if you remember anything else. I wanted to believe them, but their tone made it clear they didn't expect to find him. The next day, Eric's sister called me. She must have heard the news. What happened? She asked, her voice trembling. Where's Eric? I didn't know what to say. I don't know, I stammered. He went outside, and then he screamed. I called the police, but what? They didn't find him, I admitted, guilt knotting in my chest. Her sobs were the only response before the line went dead. That night, the cameras went staticky again. I stared at the flickering screens, dread crawling up my spine as each feed cut to a wall of distortion. My grip tightened on the bat, and I forced myself to move toward the kitchen window, hesitating with every step. I stopped just short of the window, my pulse pounding in my ears. Slowly, I reached out and unlatched it, sliding it open just enough to let the cold night air seep in. For a moment, there was only silence, and then I heard it. Jarred. The voice was faint but unmistakable, drifting through the trees, taunting me. It sent a chill down my spine and made my skin prickle. Jerry Eid. It called again in that same low, eerie whisper, dragging out each of the syllables. Rage surged through the fear, gripping me. I leaned out of the window, gripping the frame with one hand and the bat with the other. You hear me, you sick freak? I shouted, my voice cracking. I'm not scared of you. You think you can keep this up? You'll pay for this. You'll. Movement caught my eye at the edge of the woods. My words faltered as he stepped into view. The pale light of the moon illuminated him, highlighting the sickly grin stretched across his face. He stood there, holding something in each hand. In his right, Eric's switchblade glinted menacingly. In his left was a severed hand. Eric's severed hand. He raised it slowly, mockingly, and gave me a grotesque wave. Then, locking his empty eyes on mine, he brought it to his mouth. I choked back vomit. The sound of his teeth tearing into flesh was sickening, wet, and deliberate. He chewed slowly, savoring each bite, his grin never wavering. I stumbled back from the window, choking on bile, and slammed it shut. My hands trembled as I fumbled for my phone and dialed 911. He's here, I blurted when the dispatcher answered. He's outside my house. He's got my friend's hand, and he's eating it. The dispatcher's voice was calm but urgent. Sir, listen to me. Get somewhere safe. Stay with a friend, if possible. Officers are on their way now. I nodded shakily and grabbed a duffel bag from the closet. My mind raced as I tossed in clothes, my laptop, and anything else I could think of. I quickly called Jessica, a coworker, and begged her to let me crash at her place. She agreed, no questions asked. The whole time, my ears strained for any sound, any sign the psychopath was still on my property, in the woods or worse. But when I cautiously glanced through the window again, he was gone, melted back into the woods like a shadow. By the time the police arrived at my home, I was long gone. My hands clenched the wheel as I sped through the dark streets, headed toward Jessica's place. An hour later, just after I'd managed to settle in somewhat, my phone buzzed. It was one of the officers who had searched my property. Jared, he said, his voice cautious but kind. We've completed our initial sweep of the area. I need to let you know, we found something. I gripped the phone tighter, bracing myself. What is it? I asked, my voice barely audible. He hesitated, as if trying to find the right words. We found a hand, he said gently. It matches the description you provided, and it appears to be Eric's. I'm so sorry. The room spun for a moment, and I had to sit down. Just his hand. I managed my throat dry. For now, yes, he replied. We didn't find any other remains, but we'll keep looking. I know this is difficult, but we're doing everything we can. My chest tightened as I tried to process his words. Did you trace the number? I asked shakily, needing something, anything to distract me from the horrific image in my mind. Yes, the officer said, his tone measured but with a trace of unease. The number belongs to a man reported missing a few weeks ago. We think there's a connection to your case, and we're actively pursuing it. I promise you, we'll get to the bottom of this. Thank you, I whispered, though the words felt hollow. I know this is terrifying, he added, his voice softening, but you're doing the right thing by staying somewhere safe. If you remember anything else, or if anything happens, call us right away. I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. Okay, thank you. We'll keep you updated, he said before hanging up. I placed the phone down slowly, my hands trembling. Their words had been kind, but the reality was brutal. Worse yet, I was no closer to understanding what was happening or how to stop it. I stayed with Jessica for a week, trying to hold it together, but every night was worse than the last. Sleep didn't come easy, and when it did, I'd wake up in cold sweats. The man's blood-soaked grin burned into my mind. Jessica didn't push for answers. I think she could tell I wasn't ready to talk, but I could feel her unease growing. When I told her I was planning to go back home, she didn't hide her concern. "Jared, are you sure this is a good idea?" she asked, her voice low and cautious. "The police told you to stay away. Maybe it's too soon. The police still haven't identified a suspect, and Eric is still missing." "I can't just stay here forever," I said, though my voice wavered. "It's my house. I can't let him, whatever he is, take that from me." Jessica crossed her arms, her face tight with worry. "And what if going back just makes it worse? What if you walk right into another nightmare?" I hesitated, gripping the strap of my bag. "I don't know, Jess, but I can't keep hiding. If I don't go back now, I probably never will." She sighed, shaking her head. "I get it, but just promise me you'll call if anything happens. Don't try to handle it on your own." I promise, I lied. When I pulled into my driveway, late the following morning, everything looked normal, just the way I'd left it. The curtains were drawn, the lawn was untouched, and the house stood there like it always had. But inside it felt off. The air was stifling, like the house itself knew what had transpired and was bracing for an encore. I wasn't about to let that happen. Not without a fight. I installed extra locks and deadbolts on the doors, making sure they'd hold if anyone or anything tried to break through. I bought top-of-the-line security cameras and positioned them to capture every angle of the house, even synced the feeds to my phone so that I could monitor the footage in real time. A new floodlight cast a harsh glow over the entire front yard at night, leaving no shadows for anyone to hide in. And I bought a gun, along with enough ammunition to make damn sure I'd be ready if it came to that. For a few days, it felt like I'd taken control. The house still felt wrong, but I was doing everything I could to protect myself. The police promised to do extra patrols around the neighborhood as well, and they told me I'd be a priority if anything happened. It wasn't much, and I didn't honestly believe they could actually stop him, but it was a nice gesture, and it couldn't hurt. Then, one morning, it all came crashing down. I woke up to find something on my doorstep. At first, I thought it was trash, a bone, and some kind of meat, but then I got closer, and the smell hit me. The bone was long and white, streaked with fresh blood. The meat was raw and reeking, flies already buzzing around it. I staggered back, while rising in my throat. By the time the cops showed up, I was in the kitchen, shaking so badly I could barely hold a coffee mug in my hands. They took pictures, bagged everything, and promised to look into it. But their faces told me everything I needed to know. They didn't have a clue what to do. The next day it got worse. There were bloody smears on the walls and front door, streaked like someone had dragged their hand across the surface. The day after that, there were more bones, this time arranged in a spiral on the porch. I stopped calling the cops. What was the point? They couldn't stop him. No one could. That's when I started to unravel. Food didn't interest me anymore. I lived on coffee and scraps, barely tasting anything. Sleep wasn't an option. Every creak, every shift in the shadows sent me into panic. I stopped going to work, stopped answering my phone. Friends and family tried to reach out, leaving voicemails that piled up, unheard. Jessica's voice got more and more worried each time, but I couldn't bring myself to answer. How could I explain any of this? I wasn't about to drag her further into it. This was my nightmare to deal with. I spent my nights in the dark, gun in hand, staring at the cameras, waiting for the static to return. Deep down, I knew it was only a matter of time. Asterisk, 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 asterisk. It was a little after midnight when I heard it. The sound was faint at first, just a whisper carried by the wind. But as it grew louder, my blood turned to ice. It was a voice, a familiar, sing-song tone drifting from somewhere beyond the house. Jarred, I tightened my grip on the gun, the cold steel slick against my sweaty palms. Slowly, I made my way to the second-floor bedroom window where the sound seemed closest. The window was cracked open, letting in the cool night air. Jarred, the voice called again. I grabbed a flashlight from the nightstand and shined it into the yard. At first, I saw nothing but the floodlit grass, still and empty. But then he stepped into view. The beam of the flashlight caught his face first, grinning and blood-streaked, his teeth glinting like jagged shards of glass. He stood just at the edge of the woods, dragging something heavy behind him. My stomach dropped when I realized what it was, a body, limp, pale, and unmistakably human. He stared up at me, his eyes meeting mine, as if daring me to look away. Then, with sickening casualness, he crouched down and raised the body's leg. His hands moved methodically, slicing into the flesh with a knife I hadn't seen him draw. I watched, frozen in horror, as he carved off a piece of the leg and brought it to his mouth. My flashlight shook as I let out a scream. "What the hell do you want from me?" I shouted, my voice breaking. The man tilted his head, still chewing, as if considering my question. Then he swallowed, his grin widening even further, and for the first time ever, he spoke. "I want to know what you taste like." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Before I could react, he unexpectedly dropped the body and hurtled forward, sprinting toward the house. No, sprinting wasn't the right word. He ran on all fours, his movements jerky and unnatural like a rabid animal. I stumbled backward. A split second later, with a deafening thud, he slammed into the front door just below me. The entire house shook, the locks straining under the impact. I barely had time to process what was happening before he changed tactics. Before I had time to react, the sound of glass shattering rang out from downstairs. My stomach plummeted. He'd come through the living room window. I scrambled toward the bedroom door, the gun clutched tightly in my hands. The sound of his footsteps pounding up the stairs was like thunder, each step faster and heavier than the last. When he burst through the door, I didn't think. I just fired. The gun roared in my hands, and the man staggered backward, a bloom of red spreading across his chest. But instead of falling, he let out a guttural snarl and kept coming. I fired again, and again, and again. Each shot seemed to slow him, but only for a moment. He was relentless, shrugging off wounds that should have dropped anyone else. Blood poured from his body, but he didn't seem to care. He lunged at me, grabbing my arm with an iron-like grip. I struggled, firing another shot into his shoulder, but he remained unfazed. His head snapped forward, and before I could defend myself, he sank his teeth into the flesh of my shoulder. I screamed as he tore away a chunk. Blood soaked my shirt as he chewed, a sickening grin spreading across his face. Adrenaline took over, numbing the blinding pain. I drove my knee into his stomach and fired yet again, this time into his head. This time the bullets sent him sprawling across the floor, his body spasming as he hit the ground. But he still wasn't dead. I could see his fingers twitching, his chest rising and falling in shallow, labored breaths. I didn't wait for him to recover. I grabbed him by the legs, ignoring the slick, sticky blood that coated my hands, and dragged him downstairs. He groaned weakly, but didn't fight back. The basement door loomed ahead. I flung it open and hurled him down the steps, his body thudding against one stair after the other until, finally, he connected with the concrete below. Slamming the door shut, I threw the bolt and shoved a heavy dresser in front of it for good measure. For a moment, there was silence, but it was short-lived. A moment later, the quiet was interrupted by the sound of fists pounding violently against the door. The wood groaned under the pressure, splintering with each blow. It wouldn't hold for long. I looked around desperately for an escape. My eyes landed on the generator I'd bought recently, sitting in the corner of the kitchen. I've been worried about the power going out and leaving the cameras and floodlights useless. It ran on gasoline, and the canister sat beside it, nearly full. I grabbed the container, unscrewed the cap, and poured a thick stream of gasoline under the basement door. The pounding grew louder, the door starting to crack as I struck a match and dropped it into the puddle. Whatever, this man something was very, very wrong, and if gunshots to the head weren't enough to fell him, it was only a matter of time until he caught up to me if I didn't do something drastic. So, that's exactly what I did. Even as I lit the match, I was aware of the cost. I just didn't care. Flames roared to life, crawling up the door and licking at the walls. The pounding stopped, replaced by an ear-piercing screech, a sound so raw and primal it made my stomach turn. It was fury, unrestrained and wild, echoing up from the basement. I didn't wait to see what happened next. I grabbed my keys and ran for my vehicle, the fire spreading behind me. By the time I reached the street, the house was fully engulfed. But even as I sat there, gasping for air in the front seat of my car, the sound of that screech echoed in my ears. Asterisk, 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 asterisk. I didn't stop driving until the sun came up. My shoulder throbbed where I'd been bitten, the wound bandaged clumsily with a strip of my shirt. The blood had soaked through hours ago, and the pain was excruciating, but I didn't dare go to the hospital for fear of having to explain what had happened. I ended up in a motel on the outskirts of the next city, far enough that I hoped whatever that thing was couldn't follow. The room was cheap and grimy, but I didn't care. I locked the door, shoved the dresser in front of it, and collapsed onto the bed. Sleep came in fits and starts, every noise pulling me back to the surface. The next few days passed in a blur. I knew I couldn't go back, but I didn't know how to move forward either. The house was almost certainly gone, likely reduced to a pile of ash and rubble. I didn't stick around to talk to the fire department or the police. I couldn't risk it. What was I supposed to say? That some kind of monster tried to eat me, so I torched my own home to stop it? They'd lock me up before they'd believe me. I ended up moving to a new city hours away. It wasn't much, just a studio apartment with a bolt-heavy door. I told myself it was a fresh start, a chance to rebuild. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't over. Every night, I triple-checked the locks and stared at the shadows in the corners, expecting them to move. I'd become paranoid and restless, every minor disturbance leaving me on edge. My dreams were worse. The intruder's face haunted them, his grin stretching wider and wider until it split his face in two, his teeth glinting red as he leaned in close, whispering my name. I'd wake up drenched in sweat, clutching the knife I kept under my pillow. I thought that maybe the memories would fade in time, and for a while, it seemed like they might. The city felt bigger and safer, and before long, the events that haunted me seemed more like a bad dream than something I'd actually experienced. But nightmares have a way of creeping into the real world when you least expect them. It happened on a Wednesday night. I came home from work, tired and hungry, ready to collapse on the couch with a cheap microwave dinner. But as soon as I reached my apartment door, my stomach turned. There was blood smeared all over it, fresh and bright red, trailing down toward the floor. I froze. Slowly, I backed away and knocked on the landlord's door. She looked annoyed at first, but her tune changed quickly once I pointed out the blood. "Oh my God, hang on," she said, grabbing the keys to the security office. "Let's check the cameras." We found the footage quickly. It was late the night before, around 3 a.m., when movement was first captured on film. On the screen, a figure stood motionless in the hallway, facing my door, with something dark smeared across its face. Blood. So much blood. Even on the grainy black and white feed, I recognized the outline, its broad shoulders and unkempt hair. My blood ran cold as the figure moved, running its hands along my door, smearing the blood across it. Then, slowly, it turned toward the camera. Its face was partially obscured, but its grin was unmistakable. And as it leaned closer, filling the frame, its tongue darted out, licking its lips. As I watched in horror, it mouthed a single word. Jarred. As the final syllable rolled off its tongue, the screen flickered once, twice, and then cut to static. Third story. Something was watching us in the woods. I don't think it stopped. Camping wasn't new to us. Mike and I had been doing it since college. It was our way of unwinding from the drudgery of 9-to-5s, a time to drink cheap beer, cook over a fire, and bask in the quiet solitude of the wilderness. We knew these woods like the back of our hands, or at least we thought we did. This trip was supposed to be the same as the others. We picked a spot deep in the woods, far from any campsite, far from cell towers and Wi-Fi. Just the way it should be, Mike had said, grinning as he stuffed gear into his truck. We were looking forward to a couple of days of silence. Nothing but trees and the sound of the river flowing nearby. The first day was perfect. We set up the tent, collected firewood, and cracked open our beers just as the sun dipped below the horizon. The air was crisp, and the stillness was calming, broken only by the occasional rustle of leaves or the distant hoot of an owl. But that night, something changed. Something shifted. It was around midnight. Mike and I sat by the fire, trading stories and laughing too loudly, our voices echoing in the empty woods. That's when I heard it, soft at first, almost imperceptible. A single crunch of leaves, just beyond the firelight. I froze mid-sentence, my eyes locked on the black void of trees beyond the campsite. "What is it?" Mike asked, his voice dropping. I forced a laugh. Probably just an animal, but even as I said it, I knew it didn't feel right. The sound wasn't random. It was deliberate, like someone or something was carefully placing each step. My skin prickled, and the fire suddenly felt too small, its light too fragile. Mike shrugged and went back to his story. I tried to shake it off, but the unease stuck with me, like a weight pressing down on my chest. We eventually crawled into the tent, and Mike was snoring within minutes. But I lay there, staring at the nylon walls, my ears straining for every sound. And then I heard it again, closer this time. A slow, deliberate crunch, as though someone was testing the ground just outside. My breath caught in my throat. I didn't dare move. It wasn't just footsteps. It was careful, intentional. It was hunting. The next morning, I didn't mention the noises to Mike. He was in a great mood, flipping pancakes on the portable stove and humming a song I didn't recognize. Maybe I was just paranoid. Maybe it was nothing. But the forest felt different. The air was heavier, the usual chatter of birds and insects replaced by an oppressive silence. Even Mike noticed. "Weird how quiet it is," he said, glancing at the treetops. "Usually these woods are noisy as hell." We spent the day hiking and fishing by the river. It was uneventful, but that feeling of being watched never left me. Every snap of a twig, every rustle in the underbrush made my stomach tighten. I kept glancing over my shoulder, but nothing was there. At least, nothing I could see. When we got back to camp that evening, something was wrong. One of our backpacks had been torn open, its contents scattered across the ground. "Bear, maybe?" Mike said, but his voice lacked conviction. There were no claw marks, no bite marks, just the eerie sense that someone had been going through our things. "Yeah, probably," I said, but my stomach churned. The neatness of it was unnerving, like whoever or whatever did it have been looking for something specific. That night, the fire felt less comforting. We sat in silence, both of us pretending we weren't listening for something, pretending we weren't scared. Around 11, Mike froze mid-sentence, his face going pale. "Did you hear that?" he whispered. I nodded. There was again slow, deliberate crunching. This time, it was unmistakable. It wasn't an animal foraging or the wind rustling the leaves. It was footsteps circling just outside the ring of light from the fire. "Hello," Mike called out, his voice cracking. "Anyone out there?" The woods swallowed his words. My heart was hammering in my chest. I stared into the darkness, my mind racing. The shadows seemed to shift, like something was moving just out of reach. Watching, waiting. "Let's add more wood," I said, my voice shaking. The flames roared back to life, and for a moment, the light pushed the darkness back. But the footsteps didn't stop. That night, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard it a low, guttural sound, almost like a growl, but not quite. It didn't belong to any animal I knew. Mike was awake too, his breathing shallow and panicked. "What is it?" he whispered. "I don't know," I said, though deep down, I was sure it wasn't anything we wanted to meet. By dawn, the noises stopped, but the feeling of being watched lingered. Mike wanted to stay one more night. I wanted to leave. We compromised by packing up most of our gear, but staying close to the truck for a final hike. That's when I saw it, or thought I did. A figure too tall and too thin to be human, standing deep in the woods. Its limbs were wrong, too long, and its head tilted unnaturally, as though it was studying me. "Mike," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. But when I looked back, it was gone. Our last night was a blur of fear and exhaustion. The noises were constant now. Crunching leaves, snapping twigs, and that guttural growl that seemed to come from everywhere at once. At one point, we saw eyes, reflective, unblinking, too high off the ground to be a deer. Then they disappeared. "It's close," Mike whispered, clutching his flashlight like a weapon. "It's so close." We didn't sleep. By dawn, we were packed and gone, not stopping until we reached the truck. Mike drove in silence, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. Neither of us spoke. We didn't need to. I don't think I'll ever go camping again. Sometimes late at night, I swear I still hear it. The slow crunch of leaves, the careful, deliberate steps. Whatever it was, it's still out there. Sometimes I wonder if it ever stopped following me. Fourth story, how I became a Wendigo. My name is Levi, and I'm 19. I live in the countryside of central North Carolina. I usually like to go on a walk in the woods after I get off work to relieve stress from working all night. Earlier this week, something strange made me question my entire reality. This is my story, the story of how I became a Wendigo. I was walking through the woods, as I usually did after getting off work, when I heard something ahead of me about 50 feet. I curiously walked over fallen logs and rotting leaves to investigate the noise I had heard. I instantly recoiled in horror at the disgusting sight laid before my eyes. There was a bloody corpse of a deer, its body almost unidentifiable with all the blood and insides splattered all over the fallen leaves. I regained my composure slightly until I realized I was getting hungry. I looked closer and realized that this dead thing was not a deer. I lost every sense of rationality as the hunger I felt enveloped me. I heard whispers in my mind as I suddenly realized my surroundings. It had grown dark, and I had blood on my shirt. I let out a horrified scream as I realized what I had done. The whispers I had heard were speaking to me again. I heard them say, "You ate the flesh of the cursed king. Now you will become the new cursed king. Rejoice, for this is the time of rebirth, the time of new life." I felt the world fall to black. I woke up to see myself in a circle of blood, surrounded by hooded figures wearing deer skulls. On closer inspection, it seemed as if they weren't just masks. They chanted in a language I didn't understand, and I started to scream as I felt unbearable pain. I was unable to move as their chanting only grew louder. I blacked out and woke up an unknown time later on what I could only describe as a bloody throne of bones, rotten flesh, and what looked like bits of hair. I was unable to move as I saw a vision of what I call a Wendigo ripped its head off and slammed it on my own. There are things that have been happening to me that I cannot explain. I cannot help this feeling of dread and extreme hunger I have. I want to eat humans. I have an insatiable hunger, and I cannot escape what I have become. I cannot explain what I have become. I don't know what I'm going to do now. I felt extremely sick, and I passed out once more. As I slipped away from reality, I felt only pain and sorrow, but could not cry in pain. I somehow woke up in my room, and I've decided to seek help with the last of my sanity intact. Please, if you know what's going on, I need help. I've already eaten 4 people, and I'm starting to grow antlers and grow fur. My hands are black and my claws make it hard to type. Please, I'm begging you. If you see me while traveling in North Carolina, kill me. I am leaving as soon as I post this, so I don't hurt anyone else. It's too late for me now. Fifth story. A goofy trip. The sun was slowly sinking behind the tree line in the distance, disappearing behind the horizon and covering the forest in a dark blanket. I had parked my car on the small concrete slab next to the area's informational sign, which read Splintersville National Park. Now, I was hiking across the small heath separating me from the dark, tall pines. After about half an hour of walking, I found a clearing that looked spacious enough for a tent and a fire pit. By the time the last of the sun's rays had disappeared from the woods, I was sitting by the fire in front of my tent. The wind was slowly blowing through the dark, tall trees around me. It almost sounded like the whole forest was whispering, yet somehow I did not find it spooky, but weirdly calming. I had been a part of the Boy Scouts for most of my childhood, which introduced me to the likes of sleeping in tents, gathering wood, and cooking on open fire. Once I was 18 years of age, there were no more groups for me to join, so I had been offered to become one of the troop leaders, passing my knowledge on to the new generations and all that. But college life had me too busy, so I had to decline. I did miss being out in nature, though, and that's why I decided to make it a little tradition to go out on trips like the one I was on now every year. It wasn't a cold night per se, but the fire kept the chilly air away, so I stood up and grabbed my flashlight to go find some more wood for my fire. It only took me a minute to find a nice, small pine log. I let my hand run over the exposed core of the log to check if it was dry, but the second I reached down, I heard something fly right over my back and hit a tree behind me. I shot back up and looked behind me. Now I was no stranger to bats or owls, but them flying this close? Had I set up near nesting ground? Surely not, since a bird would have surely hooted, screeched, or cawed me away long before I would have gotten even close to its eggs. Scanning the forest behind me only revealed a really big, brown shoe with a hole in the bottom. It must have been at least size 18 and a half, stuck to one of the trees. It was probably left there by another camper to mark something, although I hadn't noticed it when I was putting my tent up. With no sign of the flying assailant, I grabbed a couple more small logs and branches to pile up on the orange autumn needles on the forest floor. Although these trips usually took place in the summer, I had been working extensively this year to save up for a car, so I could finally travel longer distances without relying on public transport. This did mean, however, that I had to move my trip to a random weekend somewhere in October. This didn't really bother me, since apart from the shorter days and rainier weather, the temperature was pretty similar. After I got tired of staring at the dancing flames turning into still embers, it was time to kick some sand on the charred logs and to crawl into my sleeping bag. I was well on my way to some sweet dreams when I was awakened by the beeping of my watch. Beep, 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 October 13th, read, Hallows Eve. Stupid default alarms. I pressed mute and rolled over again. I'll have to update it and turn those holiday notifications off when I get back home. Maybe 2 or 3 hours later, I was rudely awoken by another alarm. I checked my watch, but its screen was gray and dull. I listened closely and heard it again. It wasn't a beeping alarm, but more of a giggle. No cry or a call. It sounded like a sob, but animalistic. Hayuk. Yes, that seemed to close like the sound someone makes in an old cartoon when they see Brussels sprouts or cabbage. Hayuk, 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 3 cries, and the forest went silent again. Even though it was sad, it gave me chills. Was it a stray wolf? A coyote even? Did they even live this far north? After a couple minutes, that seemed like an eternity, the cries seemed to stop. I crawled over to the zipper of my tent, slowly peered through the teeth, and pointed my flashlight outward. Slowly, I scanned the trees around me, in the direction the sound seemed to come from. Except for a few birds, there were no signs of life anywhere until I looked beneath me. There, on the orange needles, a small, weathered toy laid next to my tent. It seemed to resemble a mouse, I think. It was a soft, fabric-covered black ball, with 2 round discs resembling ears. On the bottom, a black, flexible tube had been attached, connected to a small yellow shoe. The This definitely had not been here before. Did it fall from a tree? Did the wind blow it here? Did someone from college follow me to play a prank on me? Picking the toy up and turning it around revealed a small wind-up gear with a badly scribbled note that read "Twist Me" stitched above it. I half expected the thing to just play an hour loop of "Never Gonna Give You Up" or that annoying bird laughing, but when I released the gear, I couldn't place the tune at first. It took me a couple of seconds, but when I heard an extremely distorted hot dog, I realized what it was. It was one thing for someone to go out of their way to secretly follow me and drop a weird recording toy in front of my tent, but to add a distorted version of the Mickey Mouse Clubhouse theme, even that went far for my friends. Although maybe Tom would go far enough, but he would be competing in his row boating tournament halfway across the world by now. Did he make that up? No. And besides, the distorted audio loop didn't sound faked. It genuinely sounded like it was once a vibrant and happy tune that had been played and worn over time to the point where it had gotten creepy. Much more time to ponder on the hows and whys was not given to me. For as soon as the crooked music box stopped playing, I heard something scurrying behind my tent, followed by a hi-yuck. It didn't take me a second to decide what to do. My fight or flight response kicked in, and I chose flight. Quite literally, as I nearly flew through the trees. I must have sprinted the full 30-minute walk to the heath in 5 minutes max. Usually I would get winded after a minute or two, but I had only one thought on my mind: run. Once I was out of the woods, I shined my flashlight behind me and glanced over my shoulder. There was no sign of whatever was making that noise yet, but I could feel something behind me in the forest. I practically jumped to my car when I reached the concrete. I looked around. Nothing. I breathed a sigh of relief and reached into my pocket. At that moment, my head showed me attaching my car keys to a ring on my backpack, which I had left in the tent before crossing the heath. My hand, of course, grabbed nothing as my keys weren't there. I took some deep breaths, manned up, and made myself big. As long as I shine my flashlight in its eyes, appear big, scary, and don't get too close. An animal should keep its distance. I took a couple of paces out from my car, back onto the heath, all the while talking myself up. It's just an animal. I'll get my keys and sleep in the car. I just overreacted. It probably found the toy somewhere and decided to carry it around, and simple dropped it when sniffing around my campsite. Yeah, it's probably just a dog who got left, and that toy is its only plaything. But when I turned around halfway across the heath to look at my car, I saw no dog. The heath wasn't a long stretch of land, maybe about half a football field, at least enough as to be able to see what was standing on top of my old car, illuminated by the moonlight. I stopped breathing. A tall man stood on the roof of my car. His head was painted black, but his face had a weird light beige color, making it look like a flat snout. His ears were elongated and thin, like that of a dingo. His chest was fully painted orange, and he only wore a filthy, black, open sleeveless jacket. He wore short jeans and had his lower legs painted in a similar blue. Beneath it were huge, brown size 18 shoes, which his black toes stuck through the noses of. I wanted to freeze, to close my eyes and forget this monstrosity, but I was much more afraid of its intentions than of its looks. And so I spun myself around, running back towards the forest, and before I entered, I glanced over my shoulder, needing to know that thing was chasing me. It was, with big, freakish passes, was it quickly closing the distance between us. I swung my head back in the direction I was going, and too late. I had realized too late that there was a tree in front of me, and so a second after looking in front of me, I collided with it, and even the moon went dark. When I came to my senses, every bone in my body ached and my skin itched like I was wearing a terrible grandmother's sweater all over. But I would have taken an itchy sweater over this any day, because I was wearing some sort of pale, decrepit yellow suit. It was a completely yellow sweater, pants, and 2 pairs of socks, one on my feet and one on my hands. They were all stitched together and incredibly tight. Around my neck, there was a thick metal collar, which in turn was chained to a tree nearby. so escape was no option. I looked around me. Between the trees, a giant fabric roof had been fashioned from at last 20 or so sewn together tents. On the edge, I could see what had, until recently, been my tent. There was a fire going beneath the middle of the tents, where a hole had been cut for the smoke. On it was a big kettle with steam rising out of it. In the corner, there lay a pile of backpacks. Were these from other people? Were they? Before I could walk around a bit more, I heard hayuk hayuk getting louder and louder. The thing was even scarier in the daylight. It had a large black hole for a nose and two demonic, purely black eyes. Its mouth looked like it had been pulled outward and contained only two stained yellow teeth. Its earlobes had clearly been pulled out into long, thin strips, and its clothes seemed even more foul than before. They had dark, brown, and red stains on them. The next few days of my life were a living hell. The thing would feed me the stew in the cauldron, putting a small wooden bowl of it within the reach of my chain. The broth was dark and thick. It never seemed to sleep and rarely stalked around its camp. When it did, it was only to feed me or to hide behind trees and watch me. At night, it would force me to play the distorted tune from the toy. The melody haunted my dreams and the monster my waking moments. But whenever my tormentor wasn't mentally scarring me, I checked around the camp. I could see into the big cauldron, and the amount of mystery soup in it seemed to slowly decrease by the day. He never touched the bags, but I could in no way reach them. 6 days. After 6 days, I found some hope. The thing had left a tent pin in one of the roof pieces. Whenever I threw pine cones up, some would hit. Most would miss. It took a couple hits, but eventually the thin metal pin came down. I pondered what to do with it. Stab the thing? Pry open my chains? I grabbed the pointy end and started breaking away the fibers of the tree my chain was attached to. The tree was pretty thick, and the haunting presence of the beast made it no easier. I covered my progress with bark and hid the tool in the forest ground. Slowly but surely was I getting through the tree. I knew once I were to reach halfway through the trunk, I might be able to poke it over, then I'd only have to cut through whatever tendons of fiber were left holding the tree together. For 3 more days, I had to carefully chip away the tree, splinters at a time, making sure the tree was getting as weak as possible without it falling over. I woke up on a misty morning. The sun still hung low on the horizon, and the woods were slowly awakening. There was no sign of it. This was my moment. I pushed the tree over and quickly tried softening its fall on the other side. When it hit the ground with a thud, I took a minute to listen. Surely it wouldn't come investigate a falling tree. When the forest remained quiet, I rushed over to the backpacks. They were all nearly empty, apart from a pocket knife, a compass, and a plastic bottle. I took them and rushed over to the cauldron to have at least some hydration with me. But as I got close to the fire pit for the first time, I dropped my yaw in horror. There were no stones surrounding the burnt wood. What I thought had been round stones was actually a perfectly arranged circle of human skulls. I slowly approached the cauldron and saw it was nearly empty. Nearly. Lining the bottom of the iron pot, there were a ridiculous amount of small, broken, and splintered human bones. I knew for sure because some finger bones still had rings on them. I had found the owners of all those tents. There was not a single bone in my own body that didn't want to drop to the floor and start weeping. But I couldn't. I had to get out now. The plastic bottle fell to the floor as I bolted away into the trees. I had to get at least as far away as possible. After 5 minutes, I started walking at a slower pace. Safety was who knows how far away, and I still had to make it there. I tried to stick to heading south, as most big cities close to my original camping ground were in that direction. I figured the beast wouldn't have taken me far, or hoped at least. Right before the night befell the forest, I felt tears in my eyes. There were lights in the distance. Not fire, nor stars, no. Electrical lights, homes, a town, safety. I closed on in on the buildings and knocked on the first door I saw a light behind. A kind, elderly lady let me in and helped me call emergency services. And now, after many months of therapy sessions, mental help and meds, I've finally been able to sleep again. My therapist told me I should try to tell my story to a broader audience, that it would help show that the delusions from being alone in the wild for so long were no more than that. It would help me realizing that I simply had a breakdown on a camping trip and ran off into the woods. For now, I will need to get my life back together. I had lost my collage apartment, and my belongings had been thrown out due to my absence. The police could find no evidence of a place called Spoonersville National Park. It seemed to have disappeared along with my car. So now I live in a small home for the mental help. But they're going to help me get a place somewhere soon, they said. Someone brought me a gift last night. A sturdy black ball with 2 soft mouse ears and a tail with a boot on it. It play a cheery tune when you twist a gear on the back of it. I think I will go shopping tomorrow. Maybe I'll get one of those warm, black sleeveless jackets. Thanks a lot for watching the video. Till the end, subscribe to Horror in Detail for more videos. Drop your suggestions in comment section.